Good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Husey, and on behalf of the Mitchell Institute on Aerospace Studies and our staff and General Deptula, our dean, I want to thank you along with NDIA and ROA and AFA as the sponsors of these events. I want to thank you, and also we have a couple new sponsors. We have the Aerospace Corporation and we have AGI. I want to thank them for also joining us. I want to also say a special hello to Charity Whedon from the Canadian Embassy. Thank you for being here. And also for General Fay, who has been a long-time attendee of many of these events. And also Major Stern, thank you for all your help in helping to make this take place. Also want to let you know that we have two upcoming space events. Lieutenant General Ellen Polakowski is going to be speaking on April 22nd. She was originally May 1st, but just wanted to move it forward, and we accommodated her. And then Colonel Groden will talk about all things range, and that will be on the 1st of May. For those of you who have signed up for our missile defense, nuclear deterrence, and arms control seminar series, next week we have our second in a series with Mark Schneider and Steve Blank, who are going to be talking about Russian strategic nuclear policy. And every day, Mr. Putin and his friends give them more and more material to use. Following that, from the Senate Appropriations Committee, Chris Ford and Bruce Klinger, the former desk officer over the CIA on North Korea, who's now with the Heritage Foundation, they will be talking about North Korea and Iran and their strategic nuclear programs and the implications for missile defense and nuclear deterrence policies for the United States. General Wilson then speaks on the 21st. Originally, he was the 28th, but at his request, we moved it to the 21st. And then Madeline Creedon from NSA, the deputy, will be speaking on the 24th of April. And then to close out the month on the 28th, Senator Hoeven, who is chairman of the ICBM caucus, will be speaking on the 28th. If you haven't signed up for the events, we did solve the problems of Constant Contact and their software. So now that if you signed up for one event previously, you couldn't sign up for any more because they thought you'd already signed up. We spent an entire weekend, and I tell you, we spent 24 hours rewriting every single event as a separate event on the Constante website. So all 38 events that we have planned, we've done that. And so now you can sign up as you wish. We have two extraordinary speakers here today. I want to introduce both General Raymond and General North. General North is going to be speaking first. He is, you know, Vice President for Customer Requirements, Aeronautics for Lockheed Martin. In this capacity, serves as company interface across a wide spectrum of aeronautics programs, including U.S. international F-35 requirements. His experience is very relevant to today's topic, as he served as the commander of U.S. Air Force's Central from 2006 to 2009, where he was responsible for all Air Force and space operations in the Middle East. And as you know, he served as the commander of the Pacific Air Forces from 2009 to 2012, where he also was responsible for all Air Force programs and space operations in the Pacific. As you know, Lieutenant General John J. Raymond is commander of the 14th Air Force, the Air Force Space Command, and commander of the Joint Functional Component Command for Space, U.S. Strategic Command at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. And as commander, he and his team provide tailored, responsive, local and global space effects in support of national USSTRATCOM and combatant commander objectives. General North is going to begin this morning, and the topic is going to be air and space integration, how air and space forces and capabilities were brought to bear in an integrated fashion during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We are pleased to have these two senior officers who work together in the desert to make this happen. One is commander, the other is director of Space Forces. And as many of you know, the air and space communities speak a very different version of English, but serving on the same staff deployed in wartime did much to foster an understanding of a common language. With that, I would like to first introduce our friend, General North. Would you give him a warm hand as he will then introduce our speaker.
Folks, good morning. How's everybody doing? I'd like to start by clarifying this. I'm a political science major from East Carolina University. So when you think about space and looking at space from a generalist perspective, And then you look around the room and you see all of the space experts in the room, both in coat and tie and the blue suiters. It's a bit humbling to be here. I think General Raymond and I, as we discussed how we would do this breakfast discussion, he was a bit concerned because I said, you know, there's this gigantic thunderstorm over Dallas-Fort Worth where I live last night, and Jay, I might not make it. And he goes, well, that wouldn't be a big loss. So we look at this from the Earth looking up or from space looking down, and you kind of think about it, do we speak different languages? And I'll relate a story. When I was working on the Joint Staff as a young one-star, I had policy responsibilities, strategy and policy for the Middle East, in part of it, actually Northeast, Southeast, and Central Asia. In Central Asia, Afghanistan fell into that portfolio. And I traveled over to Afghanistan in the 2002 time frame, and we were responsible for building the construct for the Afghan National Army. So I went to the training centers. We stood up the first Afghan battalion, and I was watching our Special Forces folks train the Afghan National Army in the first training event. And in this event, they were working on shooting mortars and teaching the young Afghan soldiers how to shoot a mortar. And the special operations soldier was working through an interpreter, and he was going, you know, you put the mortar shell in the tube, it hits the bottom, projectile goes up, and it hits the top of the curve, what we know as apogee, and then gravity takes it down and it hits the target. And the Afghan soldier was nodding, and the Special Forces instructor thought he was really getting through to it. And he repeated it about 4 or 5 times, and the Afghan soldier said, "Sir, I have one question." And he said, "Well, go ahead with your question." And he goes, "What is gravity?" And so to a fixed wing operator, sometimes when I, even as a commander, had the privilege of working and controlling and doing things that incorporated space, I often thought about that story of what is space in our business. And so what I'd like to talk about today is air and space integration from a commander's perspective and what it means. And I'll go back to 1991 when we were looking at Desert Storm and how to integrate space in a Desert Storm, and the dean of the Mitchell Institute, General Deptula, was a black hole planner for General Horner and General Clausen. And I was succumbed every now and then to go and do some planning work, and we thought about how do we get space into this, because GPS was relatively new to the fight. We had some airplanes that had GPS in it, and so we learned quite a bit then. We didn't have a lot of satellites up, and so in that regard, we had about 27 up, 21 of them were operational. And in that regard, we spent a lot of time going, okay, are they doing maintenance on the satellites? How's the signal? Is it going to work? And what have you. So that was, I think, to the traditional operator, a first orientation for what and how space integrates into a warfight, a traditional, conventional warfight. We evolved down into that. I spent some time in the Middle East in '93, and we were doing some combat operations in the January of '93 timeframe in Iraq. And I remember that story, and so we were calling U.S. Space Command going, what's the maintenance cycle today? Because we're going to be dropping bombs at night through the weather, and we've got to make sure that the signal's good, because the rules of engagement is you had to have a high-quality signal to be able to drop through the weather, obviously to make sure that civilian casualties were as low as they possibly could be, 0 at the time. We've evolved quite a bit since then. And in the discussion of air and space integration, what I want to talk to you today is about how the CFAC, the Combined Forces Air Component Commander, or the Joint Forces Air Component Commander, integrates space into his or her domain. And it's really an environment where this, the CFAC, the role that I had for about 6 years, both in the Pacific and the Middle East, has evolved quite a bit to where Space is absolutely where you start. You know, again, we look at it sometimes from our traditional boxes, if you will, in the offices you live in. But if you don't start in the high ground and then go down looking at all the tools in your toolbox as a senior commander, then you have not been trained right and you're not integrated properly. So the Combined Forces commander in any environment has lots of hats, just as General Raymond has lots of hats. The hat of the Airspace Coordinating Authority or Airspace Control Authority is very important. And you think about airspace, and it's airspace starts in outer space, is the way I look at it. And it goes all the way down to the ground. If you don't think of it that way, you're not thinking proper. The AADC, the Area Air Defense Commander, integrates all things from space. Your first indication of incoming missiles is going to come from our space systems. And then how you integrate that in the airspace environment as you look at how you're going to defend against incoming theater ballistic or intercontinental ballistic missiles starts in space. And then SCA, the hat, the third hat that a JFAC, CFAC wears, is the Space Coordinating Authority. It's hard to control space writ large because it goes across so many different environments from an operational commander's perspective, so that's why it is a coordinating authority, because you do have to coordinate quite a bit, and General Raymond will talk of that. It is a unique authority, and it synchronizes the space capabilities in the theater across all domain, all the way from utilizing GPS to everything that is overhead in space, as many of you know. And the relationship for that, and again, I'll go back, traditionally, you've got someone who has been brought up in the olden days from some environment, and space has been introduced to them. And so the relationship of the CFAC, or the area commander, and the DIRSpace 4, the Director of Space Forces, is a unique relationship which has been integrated into the last 20 so years. And embedded into the CAOC, the Combined Air Operations Center, is where that Director of Space Forces lives side by side with his or her CFAC and the relationship there. The DIRSpace 4 is a absolutely integral position in an operational commander's staff. In fact, it is that person sitting in that role is the right hand of the CFAC or the JFAC. And a CFAC or JFAC who does not understand that is not going to be as effective as he or she should be. That DIRSpace 4 is the SME for all things, and it starts every morning in the briefings and it ends every night in the briefings. And it is so critical to understand the relationship between all those things that space brings to the daily warfight, as well to the preparation of a theater, such that in a phase 0 or phase 1 environment, you know that space provides that capability such that the warfighter can sit back to senior authorities and go, we've got this. Very, very critical. So what are some of those roles? And let me just ask the blue seaters in the room, how many have served in the CAOC or in the theater in your space role? Okay. For those who have not, see General Raymond. He's got a deployment for you. So I'd like to spend a bit of time, and General Raymond was the Director of Space Forces for me in the Middle East, and all of the senior leadership in the space commands now have had a tour. So those who have not yet, it is a track to senior leadership, and it's a very critical track. What does that DIRSpace 4 do for a commander? It advises a CFAC on space employment. Quite frankly, advises everyone. You're going to find a space operator embedded not only in the theater, and there are about 150 in the theater right now, There are 15 right now embedded into the Combined Air Operations Center in an undisclosed location in the Middle East. And they are embedded in every unified command and every service command of all services. And what they bring to the fight is absolutely critical for day-to-day operations. Representing the CFAC to all organizations is absolutely critical. You think the coordination in Washington is tough. Think of the coordination across the battle stream from air, space, maritime, and land. And that's what that DIR Space Force does in an operational environment every day. So focus a bit on Afghanistan and Iraq. What does space bring to it? Think about GPS. Think about what GPS does to every one of us. It's pretty straightforward for most of us. We've lived it, breathed it. Many of you have built it and generated it, but precision engagement is what GPS brings to the world. Whether it's MRLS, whether it's a JDAM, whether it's a young soldier on the ground, whether it is an aviator who may have been downed and needs to use a personal radio to contact a SAR force to come in, whether it's a JTAC who is generating coordinates and then generating those coordinates to an airplane overhead to put weapons on target. Precision's the name of the game. We say, our air forces can be to the foot and to the second. Quite frankly, all of our military forces can be to the foot and to the second. And the only way you do that is through the integration of space into the daily business. We all take it for granted. Space does tremendous work for ISR. Think about how you take overheads to platforms into a Combined Air Operations Center that integrates, or into a maritime control center. Can be a strike force on land, can be a strike force on the water, and then it integrates it straight into an operation. Obviously, we don't talk a lot about operations and how they're integrated, but we all know that if you don't have space on your side, it's going to be a bad day for the blue side. Shift a bit to the Pacific. When I left the Middle East, I went from one sandbox to another. And in the Pacific, you look at just the sheer immense size of the AOR, 52% of the Earth's surface, and you look at how do you do that without space? Whether it's space weather, the biggest threat in the Pacific on a day-to-day environment is Mother Nature. So if you look at how do you tell what's going on and how do you predict it, there's a humanitarian disaster in the Pacific that requires a response from forces once every 8 weeks. So how do you tie that into it? Well, you first go to space because the AOR is so large. So whether it's weather, whether it's satellite pictures, whatever it is, you're going into areas that don't have a lot of coverage. And so it's very, very critical that your DIR Space Force side by side with you, you understand what it brings to the fight. We talked a bit about missile warning. Time and distance has a quality all of its own, and warning and indications is critical, whether it's looking at what someone is preparing to do or what someone has actually done, and now there's something in the air coming at you. And so that indication and warning, whether it's sitting on the Korean Peninsula where time of flight for a Scud to force us south of the 38th parallel is measured in minutes, in seconds, or whether it's a missile shot that may be coming from somewhere and it's measured in multiple minutes. It gives senior leadership the opportunity to think about what and how we are going to respond. So all of our AORs are reliant on space. All the things that it brings, and how would you operate, if you will, and many of you have read on the Day Without Space event. I will tell you it's absolutely critical to have that integration from a warfighting perspective in what we do. This didn't happen overnight, folks. All of you in the room had something to do with this and continue to have something to do with it. If you take space away, if you take our investments into our space articles and the training and the integration, both the military, commercial, the intelligence piece of it, then you take away a huge slice of what is so important to our national freedoms. And so as we look at this, we fight a lot of budgets, we fight a lot of challenges, but if we don't start from the top down, we don't maintain that top-down superiority in that technical advantage, then we're in trouble. And so if you think about the integration we've done in the military perspective, in the early 90s, you would say, space is over here, air is over here, land is over here. We kind of talk to each other, but we don't understand each other. Desert Storm started. We understand each other a lot better then. The integration of the space warrior into the weapons school for the U.S. Air Force started in 1997. And then the integration of that every day to where the integration is so seamless that a commander today goes, where is my space expert? And they're at the table every day. They brief the critical things that most of us don't really understand but appreciate, and they make it seamless, and the integration is absolutely critical. So whether that's here in Washington in strategy and policy, whether that's in the field in operations, whether that's in the schoolhouse in training, my pitch and my real purpose for being here is to introduce General Raymond and say, here is one of our smartest space operators, from a young officer all the way up to 3-star. He has taught more people about what space really means at the tactical, at the operational, and the strategic level. And it's been a privilege to serve with him both in the Middle East and the Pacific. And it is an honor to watch him work as the 14th Air Force Commander and lead men and women and continue to educate men and women on what's so very critical about space. Day to day in combat, day to day in future. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for allowing me to be here. And General Raymond, over to you, sir.
Good morning. How's everybody? Integrity is a core value must go out the window when you retire, because if I'm the smartest guy, we're all in deep trouble. I'll tell you a funny story before I'm a business major from Clemson, Harvard of the South, for those that obviously General North couldn't get into the South Carolina school, so it is absolutely great to be here. I got to tell you a funny story to start off though. This is honest God's true story. I got picked to be the Dirt Space 4, and I was told, you're going to go work for this guy named General North. And everybody in the Air Force has worked for General North. I mean, there's nobody. If you've been in the Air Force, other than maybe the last 2 years, you've worked for General North as you've deployed into theater, or you that are in PACAF. A friend of mine was the Dirt Space 4. I won't say who this was, but he was the Dirt Space 4 before me. And in the KAOC, where we were, in the undisclosed location, all of our hooches, our little houses, where the senior officers lived, were all around the bend of the KAOC, right next door. I mean, I walked out of my hooch, and 20 feet later, I'm in the KAOC. Well, I was in the hooch right next door to General North. So this friend of mine who was in the same job that I was in and had lived in the hooch that I was in a few before me, tells a story about he was running out really late out of the KAOC one night, and he had to go to the bathroom. Don't put this in the transcript. He had to go to the bathroom. So he goes running across the street, and he goes out a different door of the KAOC than he normally goes out. He goes running out the door, and there was a 3-number code to get in the thing. I think it was 235 or whatever it was, 235. The door opens. He runs into the bathroom. He's going to the bathroom, and he says, man, they put carpets down in my bathroom. And, well, about halfway, like, God, I'm in General North's hooch with the nice carpets. So the whole time I was there, I was worried. I always made sure, okay, am I in the right place? So, it's absolutely wonderful to be here. I had the opportunity to speak here last year. I've really been looking forward to this. We've got a great story to tell in this, and I appreciate very much the Institute for providing us the forum. And Peter, thank you. and to the Mitchell Institute for providing us the forum to do this. And I'm privileged to be here with, no kidding, one of those air power legends, General North. I consider him an incredible boss, a mentor, and a friend. And I worked for him twice, as General North said. I had the opportunity to work for him, as you heard, as the Dirt Space 4 in CENTCOM, when he was the 9th Air Force Commander, the COMAF 4 and the CFAC. And at that time, again, I was the Director of Space Forces, executing that space coordinating authority on his behalf. I then, again, had the opportunity to serve for General North in 2011 and 2012 when he hired me to be the Pacific, the 5th Air Force Vice Commander in Pacific, in part of PACAF when General North was the PACAF Commander. I arrived in Japan just a couple months before the 2011 earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear reactor disaster. And I'll tell you, it was a great experience, and I consider those two jobs, the job that I had as the Dirt Space 4 and the job that I had working for General North in the Pacific, is the two most important jobs that I've had to prepare me for the job that I have today. It's not all the space jobs that I've had. It's those jobs that provided me the background that I needed to be able to do that. They were truly career highlights. And without hesitation, I would say that most of what I have learned about running about air and space integration, about running an AOC, about being a COMAF 4 or a functional component commander, I learned from General North. In fact, I'll tell you another funny story. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the later part of the thing, but during Tamadachi, when the earthquake happened, my boss, General Burt Field, who was the USFJ commander, the Joint Commander, told me, "Hey Jay, I'm working the Joint side, you got the 5th Air Force side, just go, and go fast." So I ordered every helicopter and airlift vehicle there was to come to Yokota from all over the Pacific. And I remember on a VTC the next morning, a general officer from Pacific said, "Hey, did you let General North know that? Because that's really his job to do." And I'm like, I probably should have done that. But I'm really lucky that I'm still here. But as General North said, since Desert Storm, we've focused on integrating space into the theater. And we've come a long way and have done an absolutely spectacular job at it. Some would argue maybe too spectacular, because it provides our nation great strategic, operational, and tactical level advantage. And the adversaries have taken note. And now they're trying to develop capabilities to keep us from reaping that advantage. And as General North said, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's combat operations like he led during Iraq and Afghanistan, or humanitarian assistance, disaster relief on the other end of the spectrum, like he led during Operation Tamadachi as one example. Space is integral to that. And a lot of people would ask me when I came back, what is the one thing, what's the one capability that the warfighter needs? Is it GPS? What is it? And what I tell people is I didn't walk away from my time in theater with a one thing. What I walked away with is everything. And I'll tell you that the everything part of that came from General North. He was the one that gave us a seat at the table, and not only gave us a seat at the table, gave us the voice at the table, and has really been the person that, in my opinion, that has really gotten us to the point where we are today. So space capabilities have not only fueled our American way of life, they've fueled our American way of war. Admiral Cecil Haney, the STRATCOM commander, has given me 3 priorities. Those 3 priorities, or 3 objectives, are to provide timely and assessment and warning of the space domain. The second one is to provide capabilities to our national users and our joint and coalition forces, and that's largely what we're talking about today. And the third priority is to protect and defend those capabilities. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So today's focus is on that second objective. As General North discussed, we've integrated space into the Combined Air Operations Center. How we did that and how we've synchronized space operations across CENTCOM and the Pacific and PACOM area responsibilities. As the commander of JFCC SPACE, my job is to provide those capabilities to the joint and coalition forces and around the world as we balance the demands for those global effects. So how do I do that? First of all, I'm the Global Space Coordinating Authority. So all the CAOCs around the globe, I coordinate with them to make sure that I provide those capabilities that they need. That's a sacred trust, and one that we take very, very, very seriously. So how do we do that? The 614th AOC is the bedrock. The Joint Space Operations Center is the bedrock of that. It allows me to integrate with regional AOCs as we deliver space capabilities for our warfighter, to meet our warfighter requirements. Excuse me. So let me give you a couple examples. First example, there's a program called Talon Namath. It was designed to support a small diameter bomb. A small diameter bomb is a small diameter bomb. It has a small amount of boom to it, so it has to be very, very accurate. Accuracy was absolutely vital. When that program was first designed, it was designed to have a GPS augmentation system with it. And that GPS augmentation system was going to call for having towers all across the geographic area, and they were going to send ground signals to help provide enhanced GPS accuracy. Well, at the time, 2006, 2007, the enemy gets a vote, and it's not the time to be going around building towers in Iraq. It just wasn't going to be possible. So, some smart engineers figured out back at Schriever that if they did some work on a computer back at the ops center, that they could get the best ephemeris data coming off of that satellite, enhance that ephemeris data, and actually have better accuracy than what would come off the satellite. They just had to figure out a way to get that information, this is this talent name it program, into theater and into that bomb. So what do? The CAOC, General North, puts out a requirement. I, as the DIR Space 4, said, I've got a requirement. I run back and I call the JSPAC. Put in a space support request saying, hey, we need space effects in theater. We need enhanced GPS for a small diameter bomb. General North had ordered the first small diameter bomb dropped, and our goal was to get this up and running by the time the second small diameter bomb was dropped. So I had a space weapons officer working for me, a guy named Krusty Endicott. And we embedded, as General North said, we embedded those space experts into theater. It's not like space support teams that come teach people. They work for General North. They work for me as the DIR Space Force. I said, Krusty, go figure this out. And this is where the innovation comes into play. Krusty Endicott walks across the base to the F-15 squadron and gets with the F-15 weapons officer. Says, here's what I've got to do. I've got to get a way to get this information on the wingtip of your plane into that bomb. And those guys got their heads together, worked with the engineers back at Schriever, worked with the guys that run Link 16 in theater, and within a matter of a couple weeks, we had figured out a way to get that data through a box at Schriever, out to a box at the JSPAC at Vandenberg, out to a box in the CAOC, out to the Link 16 distribution site, and by the time the second small diameter bomb was dropped, it was talent name enabled with that enhanced GPS to provide very, very, very accurate GPS to strike the target and to make sure that we're not striking anything else. That's an example that brings that integration to life for you. That's what those weapons officers in theaters do. That's why that weapons school that Joan North talked about was so important. During Operation Tomodachi, to put it on the other end of the spectrum, again, I was assigned in Japan. We reached back to the JSPAC to provide those capabilities because, again, the JSPAC is that global provider of resources across the globe. And again, reaching back, we use GPS significantly in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. If you look at plume modeling, in which way the radioactive material was going, was all done via weather satellites, as General North talked about. If you looked at trying to determine what roads were damaged and what roads were open, all done via GPS. If you look at communication, as General North talked about, when you're even on a day-to-day basis, when you're dealing with the sheer size of the Pacific, you're dealing with satellite communication. That obviously played a big role, as a lot of the ground-based infrastructure was destroyed during Operation Tomodachi. So that's kind of examples that I did personally as either the DIR Space 4 or in my assignment as in Japan. There's some other examples, though, of things that are going on today. And I will tell you, we have never been more integrated today with the CAOCs around the world than we are. We at the JSPAC and JFCC SPACE, lash in every single day with those CAOCs around the world. The most recent examples are, again, personal recovery, making sure that our airmen, if they run into problems, have the ability to be located and recovered. Again, it's a sacred oath. Providing optimized GPS and developing tactics, techniques, and procedures to ensure that GPS makes it into the cockpits, if you will, and the tanks and the ships in Iraq and Syria. As I mentioned earlier, our ability to conduct integrated multi-domain operations provides our nation with tremendous advantage. But potential adversaries have taken note, and I will tell you that advantage is no longer a given. In fact, as I said in recent testimony just a couple weeks ago, is in the not too distant future, every satellite in every orbit will have the ability to be threatened. So our big emphasis now is developing those TTPs to make sure that we can continue to provide those capabilities to the warfighter. They need those capabilities. We have to give them every advantage that we can get, and that's our job. We're transforming the JSPAC to be able to do that, to protect and defend those capabilities. And I will tell you what I have learned in my time at the CAOC with General North and the time I've learned at PACAF with General North has really been the bedrock and the foundation for us transforming the JSPAC into that type of structure to be able to protect and defend our capabilities going forward. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity. I can go on with hundreds of vignettes. I just picked a couple. I could go on with hundreds of vignettes. We're integrated into everything we do in the fight. And it's commanders like General North that have given us the seat at the table, that have helped us integrate it and pulled it from their side. And it's the folks that are largely in this room that have worked hard to get those capabilities in theater that have made this such a success story. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you again for the opportunity. And I open it up to any questions if anybody may have any.
We hear a lot about resilience. That's a term that's often used. What, in your mind, what does resilience mean?
In my mind, resilience means making sure that you can always tap into and get the space capabilities that you need to have. That's resilience. And so you hear a lot about distributed architectures. That's a piece of it. But there's lots of different pieces of it and components of it that goes into resiliency. But bottom line is always being able to count. It's like, as our chief of staff talks about, it's like the light switch. When you turn the light switch on, the lights turn on. Always want to make sure that space capabilities are available. Yes, ma'am. Yes. We've got the world's greatest capabilities in SSA. We've got the world's best capabilities around the globe. We have radars, we have opticals, we have space-based surveillance, and we have a critical program that you just mentioned called GSAP. The challenge is, we track today 23,000 objects around the world each and every day. We take about 400,000 observations a day to track all that stuff. We provide warning around the globe. We're the space traffic control for the whole world. So if two satellites are going to collide or a piece of debris in a satellite is going to collide, we provide that warning. 121 times last year alone, a satellite maneuvered based on our recommendation to avoid collision with a piece of debris or a satellite. The challenge is there's about 500,000 other objects up there that are too small for us to track. And small things going 17,500 miles an hour can do great damage. So the GSAP is a critical program. It will provide us the characterization capability. You can think of kind of a neighborhood watch. It's on orbit. They're doing very, very well. They're in the final stages of testing, and then once that testing is complete, I will get operational control of those capabilities, and it's absolutely vital for our nation that we have those. Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
What is the Air Force doing to ensure that the young men and women back in high school, elementary, are trained so that we can continue this work?
It's a great question. The Air Force is a big supporter of what's called STEM space technology program. In fact, at Peterson Air Force Base, which is the home of Air Force Space Command, we have just stood up a STEM program to reach into the local high schools and local schools around there to be able to come in onto base and get that supplemental education. So we're big supporters of that. We're active in ROTC programs to make sure that they have opportunities to come in. In fact, I'm leaving next weekend going to talk to an ROTC group. So there's a lot of outreach, and I would say probably STEM is the biggest area where we're really focusing on getting technical education down to the local schools. And we just stood one up at Peterson. Yes, sir.
Frequently in the media we hear reports of Russian bombers coming close to some place or other activities.
Is there something that's happening within the Air Force space community that can, communicate what you just spoke to Congress about, which is the growing threat to our space capabilities, to bring that political science and that business perspective, to have people support the investments that are necessary to protect GPS, protect comm, and other things? How do we bring the public awareness to that?
I think the public awareness is getting better. There's one of my old bosses years ago had a saying, space doesn't have a mother. It's hard for the average American to reach up and get this connection to a satellite on orbit. They don't understand it. I think that's changing. I think clearly across the military, as General North has talked about, that has changed. There's no question. I mean, everything that we do in the military, from high-end kinetic actions to lower-end humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, is enabled by space capabilities. The average person is beginning to get that as we become more and more, and as you know, you can't, and the example I always use, he goes to the gas pump, put the credit card in, and not have to walk in, that's because of space. Everybody understands what GPS does. I think that awareness is growing, but that's largely, I think, what we do is go out there and tell that story, make sure that the average person realizes, because it's hard to have that connection. They're way up there. Yes, sir. Good morning.
How are you looking to leverage commercial activities that are happening in space? I know you're using some commercial space situational awareness, for example, but there's a lot of activity that the commercial industry and just general activities in space is going. Are you trying to weave that into your story, your site picture?
We absolutely are trying to weave that into our site picture. Commercial space provides huge capabilities to our military. General North mentioned both in theater and in CENTCOM and in the Pacific were largely supported. I mean, a large portion of communications, I think at the time 80% of the communications that the theater was using was commercial space communications. We have a great partnership with the commercial space industry on a whole host of fronts. One of the things I'm most proud about is this commercial operators talks that I co-host with the commercial industry every 6 months. The commercial operators, we either meet here or out of Vandenberg or somewhere, and we talk about it. I played in a recent Schriever War game out at Colorado Springs, and one of the things that I played myself in that game, I played the JFCC Space Commander, which is kind of a fascinating thing to do. And then when you go home, and after you play yourself, and then you go home and you say, man, I wish I was still playing because I had all these capabilities in the game. I don't have those capabilities here. Where is the commercial part of this? Because we had a commercial cell led by Case Sears sitting right next to you, that provided incredible events. In fact, I would say it's probably, if it's not it's the one or two of the top things that came out of that game. So I came back and said, where's my commercial cell? So with this commercial operators talks, we've just stood up a commercial cell. And here I think, I know we're on track. I think it's kind of the 1st of June timeframe. We're going to have a prototype commercial cell set up in the JSPAC to be able to share information, which is critical going forward. It will help us with SSA. It will help us with electromagnetic interference. It will help the commercial folks as well understand what the threat is out there that they're facing in that environment. So I'm really, really excited about it, and that should be up again in the next couple months. Okay, anything? Am I speaking truthful? Yes, sir.
Question for both yourself and for General North.
Thank you.
Topic being air and space integration. When do you think we're going to stop thinking as space being different than the other domains? You know, we have an example I'll use is we have this idea of day without space. I don't recall having a day without airplanes, a day without ships. How do we get around that? Or is it, or shouldn't we, and just let space be treated differently?
You raise a good point. I don't think there is such thing as a day without space. I don't think that can happen. We can't let that happen because that would be a really, really bad day. And that's my job to make sure that that doesn't happen. Space is a little different as a domain. It operates differently than the just based on the physics. Thank you. I'm a business major. I had to come up with that class based on physics. So it is somewhat different. I think where we're headed, though, is as General North started out, we started out back right on the heels of Desert Storm. We set up space support teams, and we sent space operators to theater to train the theater. We then, and General North mentioned this, we stood up a space weapons school. It's a division in the weapons school. That was huge. That, in my opinion, is the single biggest thing that we've done, along with the stand-up of the Stir Space War Construct. The single biggest thing that we've done on air and space innovation. It has been huge for us. And now we're not sending people TDY to teach people. We work in theater. We're embedded in theater. There's not a division in the CAOC that doesn't have a space person embedded in it. That happened under General North's leadership. Every single division in the CAOC has a space person. General North talked about 150-something folks in theater that have space folks in theater doing space stuff. Every Army unit, division level and higher, had a space team in it. I think where we're now trying to get to, even a step forward, is, and I use this example. This is a perfect example of this. When I was the Dirt Space Force, I wanted the CAOC to speak air and space, and now cyber. It needs to be able to do all three. There was an issue that happened with one of our satellites. And I got this call about midnight saying, hey, you need to come in and speak and brief General North on this issue. I said, why am I coming in to brief General North at midnight on this issue? Why isn't the ops floor, if you will, at the CAOC, calling up to the CAOC director and then having the CAOC director go in to brief General North, just like they would if it was another issue. The challenge was, and one of the challenges that we have to continue to beat down is, well, sir, they said, sir, that's a great idea. Well, about 5 minutes later, the phone rings again. Sir, you got to come and brief General North. Why is that? Well, it's secret no foreign, and the CAOC director's in Australia. You got to be kidding me. So the next morning, I'm in a stand-up meeting with General North. We talked about the morning briefing, and we're talking pretty high-level classified stuff. And I'm like, why can't I tell this? And, well, we've deemed it important to the theater that this happened. I said, well, do you think it's important to the theater that I'm making this up now? 1/3 of the comm across the theater would have been lost? Yeah, of course it is. So we're working through those issues to make sure that we that the CAOCs, if you will. What I don't want to have happen is have this Dirt Space War office at the CAOC be the place where you go to talk space. I want the CAOC to be able to talk space, and it's happened. That's happening, and there. I think you always have to have space folks in there, obviously, because that's the difference of the domains. But I think you're getting to the point now where it's not a separate office embedded in the CAOC talking about it. It's the CAOC proper talking about it, and that's where we need to be. Long answer to a short question.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes, sir.
So you're a perfect straight man, because when I threw out the day without space, I knew somebody was going to say, I take objection to that. Because literally, and it's a transition just like everything we've ever seen in our lifetime, is we grow and we learn, and then we enable and we integrate, and then all of a sudden it's seamless. I will tell you, from a warfighting perspective, from a day-to-day perspective, from a commercial and a military perspective, I think it's seamless. Yeah, we've got bumps and we've got ridges and we've got challenges, and sometimes we've got policy issues, but a day without space is like a day without sun. It's like a day without air. And in the integration, and it's kind of interesting, the real truth of the story, when General Raymond said, why should I go brief General North? He goes, look, that'd be like two pigs looking at a wristwatch. So get the captain or the staff sergeant in here who understands it, and let them figure out how to fix it. And I had no idea it was 1/3 of the comm. Thanks for not telling me. I would have had a heart attack. But, sir, to your point on commercial and military integration, the military can't do anything without riding on commercial satellites. And you look at the stream and all of that, and how do you encrypt and what have you, and it's very important that integration between industry and government is critical in our business. I mean, that's the partnership that makes it work. But I will tell you, to your point, what's the average age of the people in this room? I mean, we're kind of old. If you went and talked to the youngsters that are doing this every day, that are growing up, from the STEM high school person who's looking out the window and dreaming about going to Mars, you know, they're thinking big stuff, and they're doing tremendous work every day. And so I think this is a perfect forum to go, look, we're there. And we're there because of all of you. And we're going to hand it off to people that's all they understand, is how well it works. And it really is very important to think about it in the next paradigm, if you will, as opposed to the one that we grew up in. And it's because of folks like General Raymond and all of the people that have worked for him and General Hyten that are taking that forward to make it absolutely seamless in our business. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Justin Johnson with Congressman Doug Lamborn's office. Thanks for being here this morning. Obviously, the Air Force, under your leadership, under General Hyten's leadership, is at the forefront of integrating air and space. But there's also Army and Navy roles in this, both on the space side and the air side. Can you talk a little bit about that overlap, that integration there?
Sure. When I was thank you for that great question. This is joint business. This is joint, and I will tell you, it's coalition business. In the past, let me segue a little bit, stomp on this a little bit. In the past, in the space business, we haven't really had to work with coalition partners because the domain has been a sanctuary. That's not the case today, and we are working very, very closely. And it's great to see friends from the embassies, specifically for Canada, here. We've got a Canadian space operator on the JSPAC floor being certified as our senior crew commander for a shift, for one of our shifts in the JSPAC. So we're working really closely. It's also joint business. When I was the DUR Space Force, my deputy was an Army 05, a guy named Tom James. He's an 06 now, stationed in Peterson in Colorado Springs. Every Army unit, as I mentioned, across the theater at the time when I was there, and I'm assuming it's still this way, every Army unit, division level and higher, had an Army space support team that was embedded in. The Navy, when the USS Eisenhower came out, in this time, the Navy had a space officer on board the USS Eisenhower to provide. So what would happen is the DUR Space Force, I would interact with all of those space folks. I talked about 150 or so folks around the theater. Army, Navy, Marine in Fallujah had a space team with them. They would all feed me their space requirements. I then would in turn turn around and feed those requirements back to the JSPAC. And say, here's what we need in theater. JSPAC would go work that and then would provide us those capabilities. So it's joint business. It's not just Air Force business, it's joint business. Thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am.
Talk a little bit about your incorporation of alignment with the classified space side and the intelligence side. To what extent is that really seamlessly incorporated into what you do? And if you had a wish list of something that you needed from Intel that you would like to see improvements in, just from a mission perspective, what would that be?
We have a great relationship with Intel. Betty Sapp and the NRO is a mission partner, and I will tell you the relationship has never been better. I have a USSTRATCOM JFCC SPACE liaison officer that works at the NRO. My deputy in the JSPAC, one of my deputies in the JSPAC is an NRO person that lives with us. We are lashed up with the NRO real time, every minute of every day. We are working really, really hard to take that integration even further than it is today. We've stood up an organization at Vandenberg called the Space Event JFC. And the JFC stands for Joint Effects Fusion Cell, and it's a cell that has both operators in it and intelligence folks from the different intel organizations that sit together in a cell at Vandenberg in my headquarters building, that they can then reach back to their organizations and fuse that operational intel picture together. That's been up and running for about 4 or 5 months and is already paying huge dividends. So the relationship is the best it's ever been. I'll tell you, with the demands of the domain going further, we've got to continue to work on it, and it needs to be even better than it is today. The challenges are that great, but things are going very, very well. we about out? Yes, sir.
Can you tell us a little bit about what threats you see to our space assets? And I don't know the extent to which you can say that they come from various state actors or rogue elements, or can you not go there?
So here, I can't go into detail there, but here's what I would say. And I said this, I've said this recently a couple weeks ago in testimony. As we have talked about over the course of this breakfast, space has fueled our American way of war. It has fueled everything we do, from high-end fight to lower end on the spectrum, not of importance, but lower end of the spectrum activity-wise, and humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, and everything in between. Potential adversaries have taken note. And there are some countries that are out there, or states that are developing capabilities to negate that, those advantages. Everything from, if you look at the spectrum, everything from low-end reversible jamming to high-end kinetic direct ascent ASATs like you saw in 2007, and everything in between. Russia and China have been open about it. They talk about their capabilities. They talk about their background using those capabilities. And again, everything from low-end reversible jamming to high-end kinetic ASAT, the threat is real. I thought I saw a hand.
General, thank you on behalf of the Mitchell Institute. And our sponsors.